Well, even in the early hours here in the Russian capital, people have come out to this scene where Boris Nemtsov was gunned down on Friday evening to pay their respects to one of Russia's leading opposition figures. And video has now emerged purporting to show the moment when the politician was killed. Take a look at this time-lapse video between the 3rd and 4th streetlights on the left side. A Moscow city government TV station, TV Center, says it was shot by a low-quality camera that faces this bridge where the homicide occurred. In the video, the reporter says the camera recorded 2 people, believed to be Boris Nemtsov and his companion. The reporter explains that the footage shows the pair walking, and then they're blocked by a snowplow. Notice also the car behind the snowplow. Moments later, the video shows one person left at the scene, presumed to be Nemtsov's companion, and a person running into a car and the car speeding off. CNN can't independently confirm the truthfulness of the video, but take a look at this mountain of flowers and the personal messages as well. He may not have been the most popular politician in Russia in life, but in death he has provoked this outpouring of national grief. Matthew Chance, CNN in Moscow.
We want to take a closer look at that surveillance video again. 2 people believed to be Nemtsov and his companion are walking, and then they're blocked by that snowplow. Moments later, a person is seen walking into the road and getting into a car behind the snowplow. They just got in there. The car speeds off, and the video shows what appears to be one person left at the scene, presumably Nemtsov's companion. Again, CNN has not confirmed the authenticity of this video.
7 years later, this remains the most important political assassination to have taken place in Putin's Russia.
Мы в шоке. Мы плачем всю ночь просто. Это невозможно поверить в это.
7 years later, questions remain about who ordered the killing.
Without direct authorization from the top, that is impossible.
7 years later, we find new evidence that a Russian agent linked to a secret assassination squad was tracking Boris Nemtsov across the country in the last year of Nemtsov's life.
The Russian people are getting used to a new force in their country's politics, the Deputy Prime Minister Boris Nemtsov.
Boris Nemtsov was the star politician of his generation. He burst onto the scene in the 1990s and seemed to embody the hope shared by millions of Russians that a prosperous and democratic country might emerge from the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Я вообще убежден, что процветание в стране наступит тогда, когда новое поколение, которое при Горбачеве, может быть, родилось, вот когда эти люди придут к власти, тогда будет настоящий расцвет.
By 1997, still in his 30s, he was Deputy Prime Minister. Some believed he would one day be Russia's president. Instead, the country took a different course. Pushed to the margins of Russian politics, Nemtsov became the most vocal critic of Putin's rule. Exposing corruption, condemning abuses of power, defending freedom of expression, even as the country slid into authoritarian rule. When Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, Nemtsov denounced what he saw as an unprovoked attack by an increasingly autocratic president.
Мы должны сказать «нет войне», мы должны сказать «хватит маразму», мы должны сказать «Россия и Украина без Путина».
He knew it was dangerous to speak so bluntly. In February 2015, he told a reporter that his mother, who was then 86 years old, had repeatedly warned him, "When will you stop criticizing Putin? He'll kill you." 17 days later, unknown assassins shot Boris Nemtsov 4 times in the back. He died at the scene.
It was impossible to imagine that it could happen.
Olga Shorina was a friend and colleague of Nemtsov.
That their political opponent would be killed, just killed in the center of Moscow. It was impossible.
As Russia mourned, Putin vowed to bring the killers to justice.
Значит, я уже высказывался по этому поводу. Я считаю, что это абсолютно позорное явление. Трагическое и позорное.
3 days later, the head of the FSB, the country's main security agency, delivered a report that identified the assassins. 5 ethnic Chechens, some linked to the brutal Kremlin-backed warlord Ramzan Kadyrov, were arrested, tried in a military court, and, in 2017, convicted of murdering Nemtsov. For the Russian authorities, the case was closed. But awkward questions remained.
Only the immediate perpetrators, and probably not all of them either, faced any kind of justice at all.
Vladimir Karamurza, a friend and protege of Nemtsov, was among the many Russians who wanted to know who ordered the killing and why.
You cannot consider a crime to be solved unless you also have the organizers and masterminds, not just the sort of the lowest level of perpetrators. Who then was the ultimate mastermind?
One day, they hoped, new evidence might come to light. And now, 7 years later, it has. Journalists at Bellingcat, The Insider, and BBC Eye investigations can now reveal that in the year running up to his murder, Boris Nemtsov was being shadowed by a government agent linked to a secret assassination squad. According to his documents, the man's name is Valery Nikolaevich Sukharev, and all the evidence indicates he serves with the FSB. Sukharev has no public profile, and as far as we can tell, was unknown to Nemtsov. But when we got hold of the train and flight reservations Sukharev made that year and checked them against the known movements of Nemtsov, an unmistakable pattern emerged. We've reconstructed Nemtsov's movements by cross-referencing his travel booking data against his phone records and his social media posts. Most of these trips took him from Moscow, where he lived, to Yaroslavl, where he sat in the regional parliament. According to the booking data we obtained, these are the journeys taken by Boris Nemtsov in the year running up to his murder. And these are the trips made by FSB agent Valery Sukharev. Sukharev made 15 round trips. On 13 of these journeys, he was shadowing Boris Nemtsov, including on a round trip from Moscow just 10 days before Nemtsov was killed. The first tale, for which we have evidence, took place on May the 19th, 2014. At 13:35, Nemtsov set off from Moscow's Yaroslavsky railway station and headed to Yaroslavl, where he was due to attend a meeting in parliament. Sukharev followed on another train, arriving exactly 25 minutes after Nemtsov. The next day, Sukharev got back to Moscow just after 9 o'clock, a day before Nemtsov's return. A similar pattern recurs through the autumn and winter of 2014. Nemtsov takes the train to Yaroslavl, shadowed by Sukharev. it looks like Sukharev knew Nemtsov's plans in advance because he often arrived in the city just ahead of his target. There's a break in Nemtsov's travel pattern. A single trip to Novosibirsk made in July 2014. And it's here that we find something even more interesting. According to the travel data, Nemtsov booked his flight online on July the 2nd at exactly 10 minutes past midnight. Sukharev was also in Siberia that weekend, and this time he was not alone. His traveling companion was another suspected FSB operative, Alexei Krivoshokhov. The two agents flew in on July the 4th, just ahead of their target, and returned to Moscow on July the 6th, taking off an hour before Nemtsov. Nemtsov was in Novosibirsk to present a report on corruption in Russia's state-owned energy giant Gazprom.
Вместо того, чтобы делать для своей страны что-то полезное, один вред. Значит, Луку мы держим за деньги.
We don't know if the two FSB agents attended that speech, but we do know that they'd booked their flights to Novosibirsk at 20 past midnight on July the 2nd, exactly 10 minutes after Nemtsov booked his. How might an FSB agent find out with such precision the travel plans of a man he was tailing?
That would be the easiest thing in Russia.
Christo Grozev is an investigative journalist who's helped expose a state-backed assassination program in Russia.
There's this database called Magistral, and it's a centralized system of keeping track of every ticket that a person purchases on planes, on boats, on trains. And if you're an FSB officer, you would just be able to log in into that database and see, for a particular person, all of the tickets that they're purchasing, have purchased, or are buying at this very moment.
It looks as though, just after midnight on July the 2nd, the Magistral system alerted the FSB agents to the flight booking that Nemtsov had just made.
This allowed the two officers, Sukharev and Krivoshokhov, to buy tickets that would get them into Novosibirsk just before Nemtsov.
Magistral makes life a lot easier for Russia's security agents, but it can also be used to expose them. We only know so much about the movements of Sukharev and Krivoshokhov because their travel reservations too were captured by Magistral.
There's a huge black market for data in Russia. You can, through a broker, buy somebody's passport data, somebody's copy of a driver's license. You can get hold of any data, including the secure FSB data.
The records we're using for this story come from multiple sources, including data exported from Magistral by corrupt officials, sold on the black market, and then obtained by Bellingcat, The Insider, and the BBC.
Magistral is meant for the FSB officers that are supposed to solve crimes. But the irony here is that in a corrupt society like Russia, this is a double-edged sword, and it allows people like us to actually go and tail these same spies, these same FSB officers. That allows us to actually expose crime that has been committed by them.
The last time we see Sukharev shadowing Nemtsov is in February 2015. Both men left for Yaroslavl on Monday the 16th and came back to Moscow the next day. An hour before his train left, Nemtsov posted these photos to Facebook. 10 days later, he was dead. Now, if you know anything about Russia, you might be thinking, of course the security services were keeping an eye on Nemtsov. That's what they do. But Sukharev was not some low-ranking recruit on routine business. According to the US Treasury, the FSB's mandate includes managing internal political threats on behalf of the Kremlin. And in that capacity, Agent Valery Sukharev has been linked to at least 2 apparent assassination attempts, both aimed at prominent critics of Vladimir Putin. The first target was Nemtsov's friend and protege, Vladimir Kara-Murza, who, in the weeks after the shooting, was already pointing the finger of blame towards the Kremlin.
Well, first of all, I knew from the beginning that the order to assassinate Boris Nemtsov was given by Vladimir Putin personally. To imagine that the leader of the opposition, the main leader of the opposition, the most prominent, the most effective, the most powerful political opponent of the regime, would be assassinated literally in front of the Kremlin walls, in what is perhaps the most secure area, not just in Moscow, probably in the whole of Europe. And that could happen without direct authorization from the top, that is impossible to imagine, not in the kind of system that Putin built.
The Kremlin has always denied any involvement. From February to May 2015, according to evidence previously uncovered by Bellingcat, Kara-Murza was himself shadowed on at least 4 occasions by members of the FSB. On May the 24th, he flew to Kazan, tailed by an FSB team which, the travel records show, included Valery Sukharev. 2 days later, back in Moscow, Kara-Murza collapsed, unable to breathe.
And then within hours I was in intensive care on life support with a multiple organ failure, in a coma, with doctors telling my wife that I had a 5% chance to survive. So I knew, of course, from the very first moment what it was. I knew this was done by the FSB because they have a decades-long track record of poisoning political opponents of the Kremlin.
2 years later, Vladimir Kara-Murza was poisoned for a second time. Again, he'd been tailed by FSB agents. Again, he ended up in a coma. Again, he survived. The second target has been described as the man Putin fears most, Alexei Navalny, the opposition leader whose anti-corruption videos have reached millions of young Russians.
Путин и его группа воров хотят пожизненной и бесконтрольной власти. Представляем вам самый секретный дворец в России. Дворец Путина под Геленджиком. Подписывайтесь на наш канал, здесь говорят правду.
Time and again, Navalny has transformed online outrage into real-world protests, threatening the regime and leading directly to his own arrest and imprisonment. In 2020, Navalny was poisoned using Novichok, a nerve agent developed in the Soviet Union and banned under international law.
Я знаю, кто хотел меня убить. Я знаю, где они живут, я знаю, где они работают, я знаю их настоящие имена, я знаю их поддельные имена. У меня есть их фотографии.
Bellingcat established that back in 2017, Navalny had been tailed during his election campaign by an FSB team that included, once again, Valery Sukharev. Sukharev was not part of the ground team that followed Navalny across Russia 3 years later, in the weeks leading up to the attempted assassination. But he was in phone contact with at least 4 members of that team, as well as with an FSB officer further up the chain of command. Phone logs reveal that in the months immediately before the poisoning, Sukharev exchanged almost 150 phone calls or texts with those 5 members of the Navalny assassination squad. The attempted murder of Alexei Navalny, in combination with his own poisoning, brought Vladimir Kara-Murza to a shocking conclusion.
In the 21st century, in a European country, there's a professional squad of assassins in the employment of the state whose job it is to murder, physically eliminate political opponents of the government. This is our reality in Russia under Vladimir Putin.
Now, this investigation has revealed that a man deeply connected to that assassination squad, and perhaps in the case of Navalny, among those coordinating it, was tracking Boris Nemtsov across Russia in the months, weeks, and days leading up to his death. We put these findings to the Russian government and to the FSB. The Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, told us all of this has nothing to do with the Russian government. It looks like another fabrication. The FSB did not respond. As a method of killing your enemies, poison doesn't always work. But it offers the assassin one key advantage: deniability. The victim was diabetic. He drank too much, or overdosed on antidepressants. All of these things were suggested by state-controlled media after Navalny, Kara-Murza, and other critics of Putin fell ill. Shooting someone in the back, a stone's throw from the Kremlin, leaves no such doubts. But perhaps that was the point.
The idea of Putin is to have nobody inside Russia against him. But there are still people who are against. Putin doesn't want them to be seen, to be heard. That murder, that assassination was the demonstration of this. Stop talking. You can be against, but stop demonstrating. Don't go to rallies. Don't speak about it. Don't speak out your opinions. Since then, we understand that he will kill everybody who is against him.